Kagurabachi Chapter 95 is here, and with it comes this brand new color cover page, so let's get straight into it. Alright, so Chapter 95 is titled Flood, and we pick up with our crew in the room with the Tsunuchi having just run into Kasen, the leader of the Kamunabi, and he's given a little bit of a speech here. He says, powerful dynasties of sorcerers like the Sazanami clan have existed in various places since antiquity. And until recently, their activities were only known in the underworld. Sorcery was practiced in the shadows. And it was during the Seitei War 18 years ago that the public became aware of sorcerers and their activities intensified. The Kamunabi is what brought order to this country, an agency of sorcerers established by the government. We're strong, but we're cobbled together with no real legacy. Powerful, traditional lineages feel no need to yield to us. Even today, we remain in a tense deadlock with those families. We're only barely maintaining a minimal semblance of public order. That's right, the fact that the Rakuzaichi was just barely allowed to exist is just one example. That's how limited our reach is. I believe that if we had the ability to bring all of those powerful clans under one umbrella, then we could establish true law and order. But those lineages will never bend to lukewarm threats. That's why we need an all-powerful weapon. In other words, the enchanted blades. Ichiki just looks at him and says, "We've been over this. We beat that horse to death right after the war. The Tsunuchi enchanted blade caused the malediction, the greatest atrocity of all time." And Kasen says, the Tsunuchi didn't commit it, the Swordmaster did. We should execute the Swordmaster, establish a new bearer, and harness its power. And Ichiki says, it was the Swordmaster's crime, but the enchanted blade executed it. The enchanted blade is also to blame. The true depths of those swords' powers were unfathomable even to Rokuhira. We can't rule out the possibility of another malediction. As long as that risk remains, using those powers is not an option. That's why we contained the enchanted blades and established an education system to cultivate our successors. We have a long road ahead, but even if we don't live to see it, human beings must build a peaceful world. And Kasen says, yes, that is the consensus the Kamunabi reached 18 years ago. However, we can't rule with that approach. The world needs the enchanted blades. Few agreed with me back then, but I harbored that conviction in secret, and I maintained my position as a leader, all for this day. We can finally begin to establish order with the enchanted blades. And Ichiki says, conspiring with thugs while professing lofty ideals? And Kasen says, I'm prepared to make many sacrifices for a brighter future, including my pride, including the lives of the sword bearers who will go with the Swordmaster when he dies, including Rokuhira's life, and including you who resist me today. And as Kasen says that, he readies his fingers and prepares to cast some sorcery. But before he can do anything, Azami is already on top of him, and he literally one-shots him with a punch to the dome. He then just looks at Ichiki and says, Mr. Ichiki, you interrogate him. He should know who every last Hishaku sorcerer is. And Ichiki just says, yes. Where are you going? And we see Azami just approach the elevator, and he says, to kill their leader. We then cut back to Yura, Uruha, and Natsuki, and Yura is still choke slamming the both of them after activating the Tsunuchi's powers, and he says, with this power, we will overthrow you. And as he's gripping them there, he starts to wince in pain from, I guess, the channeling of this power. And because of that brief interruption, both Natsuki and Uruha are able to escape from his grasp and kind of dart away for a moment. And Yura grabs his head and he thinks to himself, to think that Kiora managed this even with severe injuries from head to toe. We then get a quick glimpse of Hokuto, who is kind of gathering himself from underneath a bookcase, I guess, in kind of the hassle of their previous battle. And he says to himself, it's time to get to work. We then see Yura gather himself and chant Centipede. And we see that Centipede sorcery basically rocket out across this room and cause massive destruction. And we see Uruha immediately grab Natsuki's hair and yank him down because he thinks back to when Hakari did the same thing to him. And Natsuki is like, don't pull my hair. And Aruha is like, I just realized how to evade it. And Natsuki's like, I could have dodged it myself. Let me go. And we see the devastation from this attack again, just kind of wreck through this room. And we see Yura just sitting there, like gathering his breath. And he says, the sword master, I'm coming to kill you. And then the Tsunuchi will be mine completely. We then see a door to this room come flying off its hinges as we see Azami in the doorway, having made his way to Yura. And he thinks to himself, so their intention is to rule with the Tsunuchi. I can imagine endless horrors that could lie beyond. We then cut back to Kasen and Ichiki, and Kasen is just like a bloodied mess after taking that punch from Azami, and he's just catching his breath, and he says, it's futile. It's the power of the Tsunuchi. And Ichiki is thinking to himself, and he's thinking back to what Azami said a few chapters ago when he said, oh, I'm younger. He's saying that was just Azami being humble. His sorcery is truly outstanding. Kudo, I know. When you said that Azami's on another level, you meant on every level, including his sorcery. Azami will stop them. Then the final page of the chapter is just this full page panel of Azami looking cold as hell, holding his sorcery and saying, don't you worry, Rokuhira, you can rest in peace. And that's where the chapter ends. Man, this chapter was so good. I love Azami, man. The Drip King is back and we are about to see his full potential, but I'm very worried for him going up against Yura. Like, I don't think he's going to win and save the day here, clearly. Plus, we have Samura and Chihiro showing up, so I hope our boy Azami can at least survive until they show up and he doesn't just get, splattered across the pavement here, but we will have to see. All right, I've got so many initial thoughts here. First and foremost, we are finally getting some insight on what Yura aims to do. This is something I talked about a lot in the previous chapters when we saw him activate this ability, and he basically called it suicidal. So I was like, okay, is he just giving away his life for the cause here? But no, now we know he's basically only doing this as a last-ditch effort, and he plans to kill the Sword Saint, which I'm assuming if he's successful in doing so, then he obviously won't fall to the corruption of the Sword Saint, right? So he's kind of put himself on a ticking clock here. He needs to kill the Sword Master before the Sword Master completely ruins him, basically, right? So that's his plan, which is interesting. Again, it's a huge gamble. So it's what's ultimately going to happen at the end of this arc, right? Because, either Yura is going to die or the Sword Master is. And if the Sword Master dies, a lot of other people are going to die due to the eternal contracts, unless there's some loop around fix where they can replace someone else before that happens or something. I don't know, a lot of different possibilities here, but it shows that, Yura, one, is not the Sword Saint, nor his puppet, nor is even allied with him, but, kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing, but he plans on killing him. So, what's the end game of this going to be? Also, in terms of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, we know that Kasen is the traitor, at least one of the traitors, and he is reluctantly perhaps working with Yura and them in order to get the Tsunuchi and kind of consolidate power so that he feels they can actually lead the world forward. We basically found out that, the Sazanami clan, this powerful sorcery family, is just one of many in this world. And they were all underground until the Seitei War, when it basically became public knowledge that these sorcerers exist. And he's saying that yeah, we kind of put the Kamunabi together, but we're really just kind of holding things together with straw and toothpicks. It's not a real consolidation of power because we have no threat behind what we're capable of. We can't use the enchanted blade, so all of these other ancient sorcery families aren't going to listen to us because we can't back up anything we're doing. So we need the Tsunuchi, we need the enchanted blades to rule with an iron fist, basically. And he's saying, I'll do whatever it takes to get to that point. So again, we just have so many pieces on the board right now, and Samura and Chihiro are on the way, right? So the climax of this arc is just going to be absolute insanity, and I cannot wait to see how Hokuzono ties everything up and where he leaves us at the end of this. But speaking of Hokuzono, man, I hope he's taking care of himself, and I wish he would take a break. I wish Weekly Shonen Jump would just let him take a break. Because if you didn't read this chapter, a lot of the panels, especially toward the end, were just rough sketches. Like, it was clearly unfinished, and I'm assuming the man just has too much on his plate right now, so I hope he can find some time for himself. Anyways, this was a gorgeous chapter, even with the rough sketches, and I cannot wait until next week. So y'all let me know all of your thoughts. Come join us in the Discord, and as always, thank you for watching.